He could read newspapers while blindfolded, ride a bicycle through busy streets with his eyes completely covered, and perform stunts that left even scientists baffled. To some, Kuda Bux was a fraud, a showman who fooled the masses. But to others, including doctors, magicians, and skeptics, he was something else entirely. A man who seemed to possess a real, inexplicable power. This is the unbelievable true story of Kuda Bux, a Kashmiri mystic born in British India who stunned the world with his second sight, a gift he claimed allowed him to see without using his eyes. From a curious boy in Kashmir to a global sensation, he performed on TV in America, stood before scientists in London, and amazed crowds across Europe. But behind the mystery lies a deeper story, one of obsession, loss, belief, and a lifelong quest to prove that the impossible might actually be possible. Before he was called a miracle man, Kuda Bux was just a curious boy fascinated by fire eaters, snake charmers, and traveling fakirs. While other boys played games, he practiced walking with his eyes shut. At first, it seemed like a child's fantasy, but his obsession grew, and so did his skill. Soon, he could read without looking, walk through obstacles blindfolded, and eventually perform with layers of cloth, gauze, and even lead shields tightly wrapped over his eyes. Magicians accused him of trickery, but doctors in London, after inspecting the bandages themselves, couldn't explain it. When American TV put him to the test in front of millions, he passed. So was he a gifted performer, a clever con artist, or a man who had truly unlocked some hidden potential of the human brain? Whatever the truth, this is the story of Kuda Bux, the man who could see without sight. In 1905, in the valleys of Kashmir, a boy named Kuda Bux was born. His family was wealthy, respected merchants who had built their fortune through saffron, the red gold of Kashmir. Kuda's father was a stern man, focused on business and legacy. His mother, gentle yet strict, often reminded him, a son must protect his family's name. Respect is the true wealth of this house. But from the very beginning, Kuda was different. While other boys of his age played in the saffron fields, chasing each other with laughter, Kuda would sit alone, watching shadows, staring at flickering oil lamps, and asking strange questions no one could answer. Why could light pass through glass but not through stone? Why did some men claim they could walk on fire or read without seeing? His family grew worried. In their eyes, these were not the thoughts of a young heir to a business empire. These were distractions, street magic, mysticism, superstition. These were things beneath the dignity of a saffron merchant's son. But Kuda could not resist. Every time he saw a street performer, his eyes lit up. He studied how a coin disappeared into thin air, or how a man pretended to swallow fire. He didn't see them as cheap tricks. To him, they were glimpses of a hidden world, proof that the impossible might, somehow, be possible. At night, when the house slept, Kuda would perform his own experiments. He tied a cloth tightly over his eyes and tried to walk around the room without stumbling. He would sit for hours, whispering to himself, trying to see without seeing. His parents noticed his strangeness and scolded him often. But the more they pulled him back toward family duty, the more his curiosity pulled him away. By the time he was a teenager, Kuda stood at a crossroads. On one side was the path his family had prepared for him: education, wealth, and business. On the other side was something uncertain, dangerous, and ridicule. A life chasing illusions, learning from wandering magicians, and pursuing a mystery no one believed in. And then one day, fate made the choice clearer. A traveling performer arrived in their town, a conjurer who called himself Professor Moore. Unlike the ordinary street magicians Kuda had seen, Moore's performance was extraordinary. Before a stunned crowd, he bent metal without touching it, read numbers written on paper he never saw, and performed tricks that seemed like genuine miracles. Kuda watched, mesmerized. And so at 13 years old, Kuda made a decision that would change his life forever. In 1918, Kuda was just 13 years old when he made the most daring decision of his life. On a quiet night, while the rest of his family slept, Kuda packed a small bundle, just a few clothes, a piece of bread, and some coins he had hidden away. He slipped out into the cold night air, leaving behind the scent of saffron fields, the warmth of his mother's voice, and the heavy shadow of his father's expectations. He wasn't running from home. He was running towards something, though he couldn't yet name what it was. He traveled to Lahore, a city full of traveling performers, and started searching for Professor Moore. After days of searching, fate reunited him with Moore. Moore was an Englishman who carried himself like a scholar, but in truth, he was a showman who survived by astonishing crowds with feats of magic and mind reading. When Kuda approached him, Moore questioned, "What can a boy like you do for me?" Kuda, desperate, replied with the only truth he had, "I'll do anything. I just want to learn." Perhaps Moore saw something in the boy's eyes, an unusual hunger, a determination. Whatever it was, he agreed, and so, at just 14 years old, Kuda became Moore's assistant. The boy who had once been scolded for wasting time on tricks was now part of a traveling spectacle. He set up stages, carried props, and watched every detail of Moore's performances. More importantly, he studied. He learned how audiences thought, how their eyes could be deceived, how belief itself could be manipulated. But what fascinated Kuda most wasn't the tricks with cards or coins. It was the mystery of perception. How much could the human mind achieve when pushed beyond its limits? Could it be possible to see without eyes, to feel beyond touch, to break the boundaries of human senses? By 1920, when Kuda was 15, Moore trusted him enough to take the stage himself. At first, it was simple: disappearing objects, mind-reading games, little illusions to warm up the crowd. But Kuda had something that even Moore didn't: a natural showmanship. His voice carried with confidence, his presence commanded attention, and his curiosity made him push further with every act. Audiences noticed, whispers spread. This young Kashmiri boy was not just another assistant. He was becoming a performer in his own right. By the time Kuda turned 18 in 1923, he had already traveled with Professor Moore to the busy ports of Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, the grand colonial halls of Burma, now Myanmar, and the shining theaters of Bombay, now Mumbai. He had learned every trick Moore could teach. He knew how to make people believe, how to control their attention, how to turn illusion into wonder. But now, something inside him was changing. While Professor Moore was happy performing the same acts again and again, Kuda wanted something more. Something real, something that proved the power of the human mind. He didn't want to remain just a street performer. He wanted to discover something that no one had ever done before. So one day, Kuda made a brave decision. He left Professor Moore and began his own journey to explore one of the strangest ideas he ever had: that a man could see without using his eyes. After leaving Professor Moore, Kuda began traveling alone, performing small shows in Lahore, Rangoon, and Calcutta. His early acts were rough, but each city made him stronger. He kept pushing his limits, walking barefoot on burning coals, piercing his body without pain, and testing his most daring idea: seeing without using his eyes. By his late 20s, word began to spread. Indian newspapers called him the Kashmiri Miracle Boy. His performances weren't perfect, but there was something raw and real about them, something people couldn't explain. Still, Kuda knew that if he stayed in India, he'd always remain just a sideshow. To truly make his mark, he had to go where the world's biggest audiences were. It was 1935, and at that time, people in London were fascinated by the stories they heard from travelers and merchants who passed through India, but no one had ever performed in front of them before. So, this was the perfect time for Kuda Bux to show his eye magic. He boarded a ship and traveled to London. The first problem he faced was his name. People in London couldn't pronounce it, so he changed it to KB Duke at first, and later to Kuda Bux. The new name suited his personality and was easier for English people to say. Then he started his first show, which he called X-ray Vision. With his eyes sealed under layers of dough, cotton, and bandages, he would read words, switch off candle flames with his hand, and walk through obstacles without even putting his feet on them. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. Was it real magic, or something beyond human understanding? Soon, newspapers started writing about him. They called him the man who sees without eyes, and his name began to spread all across London. Kuda's popularity grew very fast, but at the same time, people wanted to test if what he was doing was real. That's when he came under the notice of a famous ghost hunter, Harry Price. Price had exposed dozens of frauds and fake magicians before, and if anyone could uncover the truth behind Kuda's powers, it was him. In July 1935, Price assembled a team of doctors for an official test in London. He came prepared with everything he thought could crush the illusion once and for all: surgical bandages, adhesive tape, thick pads of cotton wool, and a special tie-on mask made of 2 heavy layers of black cotton with cotton wool sandwiched between them. The blindfold was so tight and so thorough that no ordinary person could possibly peek through. But Kuda Bux wasn't ordinary. With the blindfold strapped across his eyes, layers upon layers sealing every possible gap, Bux calmly picked up a book and began to read aloud, word for word, line for line. The room fell silent. What they had just witnessed was impossible by every standard of human ability. And then came September 1935. Another test, once again organized by Harry Price. This time, more journalists, skeptics, and observers crowded the hall. Once again, Bux triumphed. By the next morning, his name was everywhere. The Times, the Daily Mail, the Manchester Guardian, every newspaper carried sensational headlines about the man who could see without eyes. Some declared him a wonder of science. Others hinted he was a fraud too clever to be caught. But one thing was certain, no one could ignore him anymore. These tests didn't just make him famous, they turned Kuda Bux into a legend. The scientific community split into two camps. Some experts insisted there must be a hidden trick, a gap in the bandages, a sleight of hand, something that had escaped detection. Others, though, admitted uneasily that they had no explanation at all. Harry Price himself, a man famous for destroying reputations, had to concede. Whatever Kuda Bux was doing, it could not be easily explained away. To prove that his powers worked beyond the stage, Bux sometimes performed outdoors. One of his most famous demonstrations was riding a bicycle through the crowded streets of London, completely blindfolded. Onlookers gasped as he swerved past cars and pedestrians without a single collision. By the end of 1935, Kuda Bux's name had crossed borders faster than any magician of his time. What began as whispers in London theaters had turned into bold posters plastered across Europe. Kuda Bux, the man with the X-ray eyes. But fame is never gentle. With every show, the pressure grew heavier. Crowds demanded bigger, riskier performances. Reading books blindfolded was astonishing, yes, but audiences wanted danger, spectacle, the kind of acts that made newspapers scream in headlines. So Kuda Bux adapted. He began performing fire-walking feats, strolling barefoot across beds of glowing embers as calmly as if he were on a morning walk. Circuses and theaters across Europe battled for his contract. By the late 1930s, Kuda Bux was no longer just a curiosity. He was a star attraction, earning top billing alongside lions, trapeze artists, and daredevils. And then, the world changed. In 1939, war erupted across Europe. The theaters dimmed, the circuses folded, and the crowds that once came seeking wonder were now seeking safety. For a man whose fame relied on performance, silence was the greatest enemy. But the real show, the one that would carry his name across the Atlantic, was still to come. When the Second World War finally ended in 1945, Europe was rebuilding, and in the late 1940s, all roads of entertainment led to one place, America. He had conquered the skeptical crowds of London, dazzled Paris and Berlin, and survived the war years as a legend in waiting. Now, he boarded a ship bound for New York, carrying little more than a suitcase, his blindfolds, and a reputation that preceded him across the ocean. American newspapers had picked up stories from the British press. Indian mystic reads books while blindfolded. By 1947, he was performing in New York theaters, astonishing audiences who came expecting sleight-of-hand tricks, but left speechless. He read sealed letters. He navigated crowded stages with his eyes taped and wrapped. He walked barefoot across blazing coals, the flames licking his skin without leaving a scar. American reporters scrambled to explain it. Some called it supernatural. Others dismissed it as clever trickery. In the early 1950s, American TV was exploding, and producers were desperate for acts that could hook viewers. Kuda Bux became a regular feature on shows like Ripley's Believe It or Not, and You Asked for It, where millions of families gathered around their black and white screens to witness the man with the X-ray eyes. By the 1960s, Kuda Bux had lived the kind of life most men could only dream of. Yet, time is a cruel opponent, even for men who once seemed untouchable. Audiences were changing. The new generation, growing up in the age of science and technology, wasn't as willing to believe in mystics and miracles. They wanted explanations, not mysteries. On television, younger performers, magicians like David Copperfield and escape artists in Houdini style, were stealing the spotlight. And while Bux's name still carried weight, the crowds weren't as large as they once were. But what the world didn't know was that behind the fading applause, something far more tragic was unfolding, a twist of fate that would soon take away the very gift that made him famous. The man who had built his life around the power of his vision began to lose it. By the late 1960s, Kuda Bux was going blind, for real this time. His famous X-ray eyes, whether trick or miracle, could no longer pierce the world around him. For the boy who had once run away from Kashmir, defied his parents, and faced fire and ridicule with equal courage, this was more than just a tragedy. It was irony at its cruelest. And yet, even as darkness closed in, the light inside him refused to fade. He never lost his love for performance or his playful spirit. In his final years, Kuda Bux could often be found at the Magic Castle in Los Angeles, the private club where the world's greatest magicians gathered. There, he was no longer a mystery to be solved or a miracle to be tested. He was simply Bux, a kind old man with stories to tell, sitting among friends, playing cards. The younger magicians used to joke that they could only beat him if he didn't wear his blindfold. And so, even in old age, even in a quiet corner of a magician's club, the legend of his sight lived on. Kuda Bux passed away in 1981 at around the age of 75. His death never made the headlines in London or New York. The world that once gasped at his impossible feats had already moved on, chasing new wonders. But for those who remembered him, for those who once saw the man who could see without seeing, Kuda Bux was something more than a performer. He was proof that, for a fleeting moment in history, magic truly felt real.